Tuesday. Are you ready to vent? Are you feeling still pretty frustrated about the Calgary Flames? I understand. Are you feeling optimistic about the Calgary Flames? It's a little harder to understand, but I also get everybody's got their own thoughts. What do we got? We got Noah in. We've got JF in. Ooh, JF with a golf emoji. Ooh, harsh JF. And Jordan's in as well. How are we feeling about the Calgary Flames following another loss to the Ottawa Senators? 4-2, the final score on Monday night. We welcome you to a Tuesday night edition of Flamesnation Live. It's Pat Steinberg along with you from our Sportsnet 960 downtown studios. Literally just got off the air on the big show, right on to Flamesnation Live, brought to you by our friends at Deuce Vodka. Hey, We've been telling you Deuce Vodka is the celebration vodka all year long. It hasn't been so celebratory down in this part of the province, but hey, try it anyway. You've got the Deuce Neon. You got the regular Deuce. Check them out at your local liquor store. Available wherever fine spirits are sold in this province. And if it's not at your local liquor store, make sure you get on them so that you can get your hands on some Deuce Vodka. Okay, hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying safe. I got to be honest with you. The game against Ottawa, it for whatever reason, last night's game against Ottawa, that is, or Monday's game against Ottawa, for whatever reason, that drove home my skepticism on this thing more so than I can ever remember. Like, there is a night where they had an opportunity to actually do something and actually make it kind of interesting down the stretch. And instead, they lose for a sixth time in 8 games against the Ottawa Senators. Like, it's just, that one was hard to watch. The lack of urgency was hard to watch. And the way that they closed out the game was really, really frustrating. So I wasn't feeling super optimistic to begin with as to this team's playoff opportunities. I really wasn't. But after that was a frustrating one. That's why Jordan writes, I'm more and more convinced this team needs a huge cultural shift. JF writes, that game felt like a bottom league game. It was hard to watch. Yeah, it was hard to watch. The urgency down 2-1 in the third period wasn't really there. And that was frustrating. The execution wasn't there all night long. They trailed basically all night long. They never led in that game. And you have Montreal, and here's the one thing that I think you have to remember, or that I keep going back to, is that Montreal is doing their very best here to keep the door open for everybody. They're keeping the door open for Vancouver. They're keeping the door open for Calgary. Like, Montreal is a mediocre hockey team, and Calgary had an opportunity. All they needed to do was get over the mental hump of beating the Ottawa Senators, and they couldn't do it. And that was frustrating, because that was, for me, a really, really big opportunity to, at the very least, make it interesting. And they didn't, obviously. So kind of more of the same. Kind of more of the same old Calgary Flames this year. It has been that type of season. Got a few things that I wanted to bounce off you. I'll read a comment from Zach, who says, through all this heartache, it's actually a little sad there's still a chance they make it. Have to take care of Montreal the next 3, but at the end of the day, does this team really deserve to be in the playoffs? Maybe, but I agree this team needs a cultural shift and reset in the offseason and build for the upcoming years. And my I guess my answer would be is, the only reason that they are in the playoffs is, or is still in a playoff striking distance position. And I get it that they've got the 3 games with Montreal, and that gives you, gives a little bit of hope to them. If they sweep it all of a sudden, it's a different story. But I mean, whether they make it or not, this is a disappointing year. Whether they're able to get it done, they're still, even if they beat Montreal in all 3 of the games, Friday, Saturday, and Monday, they're still a game below 500. And I guess it's hard to be all that positive about a group that the only thing that's keeping them in this is a mediocre team holding down the last playoff. Like, the Flames should be aspiring to one of the three top spots. They should be aspiring to be where Edmonton or Toronto or Winnipeg is. And instead, the conversation is, can they finish a game or two above 500 and squeak into a playoff spot? That's disappointing no matter which way you want to slice it. And I don't know. I know they've played Toronto tough this year and anything can happen in the playoffs, but boy, it would be tough to consider it a successful season, even if they snuck in and gave Toronto a run for their money. Maybe I'm being overly pessimistic. I don't know. It's just that loss last night to Ottawa was super frustrating. They're 4 games below 500 as it stands right now. It's just, it has been that type of year. And Zach, you're right. I mean, the Montreal situation is the only thing that is keeping them in this thing, because the Habs are committed to keeping the door open, aren't they? Like, Montreal is just committed to saying, hey, Vancouver, hey, Calgary, come on in. And don't forget about Vancouver. The Canucks are 4 back of Calgary with 7 games in hand. The Canucks are in a better spot than Calgary in a lot of ways, because they are very, like, you don't have to squint to see Vancouver passing Calgary with as many games as they've got remaining. And I know that they've got a meat grinder of a schedule. Anyway, I digress. Here's what let me bounce this off you. I have not been impressed with the North Division this year. I have been so surprised in a bad way by the North Division this season, because I thought coming into this year, the North Division was going to be the most competitive of the 4 new look divisions in the NHL. I thought this division was going to be tooth and nail between 6 of 7 teams. I thought this was going to be a year where you maybe had Toronto at the top, but then I thought Edmonton, Winnipeg, Calgary, Vancouver, and Montreal were all going to battle it out for the 3 playoff spots and be right there within a few points of one another until the very end. And instead, you've got a good Edmonton team, a good Winnipeg team, and a good Toronto team. They've separated, and then you've got this absolute turtle derby for the final playoff spot in the division, and that is really disappointing and really too bad, because I thought the potential for this division was so high, and instead it's turned out to be one of the more mediocre divisions in hockey this year. Ottawa is the team that really hasn't surprised us, because they have been better than they've been more competitive than they were last year, but they're still the 7th best team in the division. But yeah, kind of neck and neck. Calgary and Vancouver. Who's the most disappointing team in the division this year? It's been disappointing to see the North Division this year. There's no doubt about it. A couple of other comments before I bounce off another topic with you. Noah says, pretty much just like the season, last night was a flamesy evening. Noah loves that term, calling things flamesy. It was kind of flamesy. JF, imagine they did make it and played against Toronto and they win that series. What a shame for the Maple Leafs. And I'll say this, like, I've seen a few people, because Montreal is leaving the door open like they are, I've seen a few Maple Leafs fans on Twitter talk about how they'd rather play the Habs than the Flames, because Calgary's played Toronto pretty tough this year. They've done a pretty good job on their top-end talent. Even though Toronto won the season series, Calgary has given them a run in the 9 games they played them this year. Montreal looks like they're going to be a walkover in the playoffs, too. Like, I don't have a lot of faith in whoever is going to end up sneaking in that 4th playoff spot. And you know what? On the other side, maybe Calgary does make it interesting. And if Calgary does rattle off a 9-1-1 or a 9-2 in their final 11 games, well, then maybe my opinion will change. Absolutely, it probably would change. But they haven't done that yet, and their playoff chances are very, very slim as it stands right now. I guess all you can hope for, as Sean writes, they needed Friday night's win against Montreal and the win last night to stay in the race. Yeah, I guess they are still kind of in the race, though. And if they can win 2 of 3 against Montreal this coming weekend, at the very least, it will be interesting. I guess the there's two sides of it for me, and I know this is kind of where Flames fans are right now. On the one hand, you don't like watching completely meaningless hockey, so you're hoping maybe the final few games of the season are still meaningful. And by keeping things competitive for this team, maybe they can be playing meaningful hockey into May. But on the other side, you're like, well, this is a year where maybe they can get themselves a better draft position. So maybe that's not the best thing to happen. I get it. It's a big time. It's a big time dilemma. I really do get it. And you know, Jason writes, you never know. Look at the Blues. Everyone said sell, and they won the cup. I get that, but those things happen so seldom. And to just say, well, maybe you can be this year's St. Louis Blues, that's just a bad way to go about your business. And I'm not saying that there's no chance, or if they were to sneak into the playoffs, they couldn't do damage. I'm not trying to say that. All I'm saying is that for an organization to pin their hopes on that is not the hallmark of a successful season. Jesse asks, do you think Treliving will keep his job past this year? I honestly don't know. I do not have a good feel on that one way or the other. There's enough out there that I wouldn't be surprised if they do make a change in that regard. That's for sure. But it also wouldn't surprise me if they didn't alter course at that, just based on some of the things we hear, based on the fact that he signed for 2 more years after this season. I don't have a good feel, and I'm being honest with you. I'm not trying to sit on the fence on that one. To predict what is going to happen at that position, I do not have a good feel on that. Jordan says, if they do make it this year, what about next year? Do we really want this team feeling like they can get into the playoffs? Man, it would set up for another year of torture. Well, and that goes back to, for me, I think an organizational shift is important, and going about business a little different is important. I really do think that is crucial for this team, and that's why I wonder if, going on this improbable run they'd have to go on, is that even good for them? It'd be exciting, don't get me wrong, but would it be good for the team in the long run? Travis writes, Pat, do you think this team's lack of size and speed in its skilled forwards is why they have a problem getting to the dirty areas and scoring more goals? I mean, partially, but I don't think it necessarily is just a size thing or just a speed thing. I think it's the personality of the players as well. Trav, I think that they just don't have elite players on this team. And that is why the conversation about what this team should do going forward and what direction they should go in is such an interesting one, because they don't have elite players that are going to, at least in my mind, and maybe some disagree, but they don't have elite players that are going to get them from being a middle of the road team to a high end team. And I think you need those elite players, and you don't get those players in free agency very often. You don't get those players in trades very often. It's very seldom, like once every few years that happens, and you've got to be the one team that hits on that. Most of the elite players that are on teams have been drafted by those teams. And that's why the conversation about, is it better to reset and maybe trade off some players so that you can give yourself a better shot of drafting some of those elite players? That's why that conversation is so important and is so prevalent among Flames fans right now. Jesse writes, the biggest thing is to stay competitive until the end so they can try to showcase some players for trade. As Pike said the other show, it's best they stay playing meaningful hockey, and hopefully Johnny and Monahan can up their trade value. I think that's a fair point, Jesse, for sure. JF says one positive note is that Monahan isn't playing that bad since the trade deadline. We can see some effort in the D zone. Eric says they definitely have elite players. They're just not playing elite. Kachuk, Johnny, hands down, are elite on many top-performing teams. Now, first of all, I'm not sure I'm on board with that. Johnny has an elite offensive skill set, but I don't think he is elite players to me don't disappear when it gets tough and don't disappear in the playoffs. So I'm not ready to say that Johnny Gaudreau is an elite player. Like elite players to me, like Patrick Kane's an elite winger. Mark Stone is an elite winger. I don't see Johnny in that realm. Matthew Tkachuk, I think has some. Here's what I'll say about Matthew Tkachuk. This has been a really down season for him. But as we talked about all day on the big show today, I think Tkachuk is a really good candidate to have a bounce back year next year because I think he'll enter this offseason knowing that he has not had a very good season. And I think that he'll be a motivated guy with a chip on his shoulder going into the summer and will come into next season with that chip on his shoulder and with that motivation. I'm expecting a much better year next year for Matthew Tkachuk. But this year has not been very good, and I'm not certain that he is an elite player. I think he's got some incredible facets to his game, and maybe could be, but I don't know if he's there yet. And the one thing that they don't have, Eric, is an elite number one center, and I think Lindholm is a great center. I really do. But I don't know if he is a franchise center, and I think that is something the Flames are really lacking right now if we're talking about them being a Stanley Cup contender. Travis says they don't have elite players, but I think if they did better drafting in the first round, this could be a different story. Also keeping their first round picks from here on out. Yeah, I don't think trading first rounders is the way to go. And, they have not had the greatest. They've had some decent hits in the first round, Trav, like Tkachuk and Monahan. Those are good first round picks. And I know Bennett's not here anymore, and I know he's scored again tonight in Florida. But they've done decently turning guys into NHL players. What they haven't had is, like, Edmonton got Draisaitl at number 3. That's a franchise-changing number 3 overall pick. And, Bennett was the next pick after that. And, you take a look at the 16 draft, Dubois and Laine, and specifically for me, Dubois and Matthews went before Tkachuk. Calgary got a great player, probably the 3rd or 4th best player in the draft, and they got him at 6, but they didn't get that elite guy. And Monahan at 6, they didn't get an elite guy. Like, they got really good players, and they got NHLers, but you're right, they have not been able to get that one elite player. And, sometimes you need some luck. Sometimes you need to be at the top of the draft. But I do think that underlines the importance of them not trading away their first-round picks. I'm with you on that one, Trav. Whether or not they go full rebuild or not, I don't think trading away first-round picks in the next few years, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense at this point. From John, he says, according to Brad Treliving, the Flames do not need elite players. He's more interested in depth players. That hasn't gotten them anywhere, and we'll see how they go about their business this offseason. It's, look, there's 11 games to go. They play those 11 games over a 30-day span, and there is still a chance that the playoffs or getting closer to the playoffs could happen. But I think realistically, they're probably not going to go, or at the very least, the probability of them going to the playoffs is low. That's why they play the games. That's why Montreal plays the games. That's why Vancouver plays the games. That's why Calgary plays the games. So there still is reason to watch this season. But at the same time, I do think that the conversations, the bigger picture conversations, are fair. I don't think anything that is going to happen between now and May 19th when they finish the season is really going to take away from those big picture conversations. And I do think, regardless of what happens, short of them doing what Jason said earlier, short of them pulling off a St. Louis Blues here, I think the offseason conversations that we're going to be having are going to be the same regardless of what happens over the next month or so. Thank you for being with us today. By the way, Sam, who asked, how do I like Bennett in Florida? Has been good so far. They put him at center. He wanted to play center more often. That was a big reason why the trade request was made here. You put a guy like Huberdeau on his wing. Bennett's looked pretty good in Florida through 3 games. I am not going to dispute that. He has looked pretty darn good so far in Florida. Next up for Calgary, they start off that really important stretch of 3 games against the Montreal Canadiens. They started on Friday. That is a 7 o'clock face-off here on Sportsnet 960 The Fan on radio. They play the Habs Friday, Saturday, and Monday. Stay safe out there. Good to see that vaccines are rolling out and more people are getting them. Be well. We'll talk to you with Pike on Thursday for another edition of Flames Nation Live. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for making these things so easy. They're fun to do, even when the Flames aren't playing very well. Thank you very much. Be well. Stay safe. We'll talk to you later this week on another edition of Flames Nation